That means there's all to play for in Boston and Skegness, an election unlike any before in this most traditional of Lincolnshire seats.
Len Tingle there on the battle for Boston and Skegness. Matt Warman, you're the Conservative candidate here. In the recent county council elections and the European elections last year, this constituency was carpeted a purple shade of UKIP. Why have voters abandoned your party here?
Well, I think if you look at the results that we've seen over the last couple of elections, compare that back to the general election, we know that voters treat different elections in different ways. But at the same time, I'm absolutely clear we can't be complacent for a moment. That's why for months now we've been knocking on doors. You'll have seen huge numbers of our posters up and down the constituency. We're not taking anything for granted. We're not complacent. We're out there as the Conservatives saying the way that you tackle the issues that matter to this constituency, whether that's investing in the health service, whether that is immigration, whether that is a relationship with Europe, it is only the Conservative Party that can deliver a solution for those problems, and voting for anyone else makes it more likely that you will get Ed Miliband and Nicola Sturgeon running the country.
Well, we'll let voters be the judge of that. But Paul Kenny, you were the Labour Party candidate here 5 years ago, and you're standing here again. You came second last time, but most pundits see this seat as a battle between the Tories and UKIP. Are you being squeezed out of the race?
Well, we'll see what happens on May the 7th, really. Or I would just say, I've got quite a few people who are going to support me on the day. I think there's some real big issues. You were just talking about what the big issues of Boston has been over the last 5 years. Obviously, the issue around immigration is a major issue, and I think one of the failures is that the Conservatives in the town, and I chaired a major task and finish report where most of the recommendations that I think were really key to the success weren't dealt with. And I think in some ways that has a kind of an attitude to where people feel in the town, where they feel some of the incumbents who have been representing them haven't been working as hard as they should be.
We'll debate that in a moment, but let me come to Robin Hunter-Clarke, the UKIP candidate here in Boston and Skegness. Now, a Comres poll the other day put you behind the Conservatives in a number of key seats. You know where I'm going with this in Boston and Skegness. Is the UKIP bubble starting to burst?
No, it's not at all. We're on track to win this seat. It's looking very good. People are sick to death of false promises that the Conservative Party have promised us over the years. They're not delivering on what the people of this town want. I'm born here. I'm bred here. This is my home. It's not his home. It's my home. People here want change. People want their say on the European Union. They're not going to get that by voting Conservative. I was a member of the Conservative Party in 2009 when David Cameron gave us that cast-iron guarantee that if he became Prime Minister we were going to have one. We didn't get that. The only way to get it is by getting enough UKIP MPs into Parliament, and hopefully I will be one of them if the people of these two towns vote for me on May the 7th.
David Watts, you're the Liberal Democrat candidate here. Now, you're a councillor in Nottinghamshire. What do you know about the problems here in Boston and Skegness?
Well, I'm not a local, and I can't pretend to be a local, but at least I've got the guts to put my address on the ballot paper, which most of the other candidates didn't even bother to do. And my job here is to make sure that we maximise the Liberal Democrat vote, to keep this country centred firmly in the middle ground and not veer off to the left or to the right.
Let me just deal with one particular issue, because the outgoing Conservative MP here, Mark Simmons, who's stepping down, you may have read this in the papers a few months ago, said that one of the reasons he was leaving the job is because he couldn't afford to be an MP anymore. The £67,000 a year salary wasn't enough. Did he hopelessly misjudge the public mood?
Well, frankly, I think yes is the answer to that question. We've been through very tough times as a nation over the last 5 years. We're turning this country round. We're on the right track under a Conservative-led government. No one wants to hear MPs whinging about how much they get paid.
Does anyone think the MP's salary is too much or not enough?
He was getting a lot more than that. He was a junior minister, the Minister for Overseas Territories. You know, this man sponsored a radio show at Pilgrim Hospital and then claimed it back off the taxpayer. People want something different, not the old establishment parties. They want something new, they want something different. That's why we did so well in the county elections in 2013. That's why we won in this area in the European elections, and that's why I believe the people have faith in us.
I think also, Tim, I think one of the big issues that a lot of people in this country, we've seen 5 to 6 years of where MPs nationally have discredited themselves. It's not just about the 70,000, it's about the second jobs as well. And I think whoever's going to stand for Boston and Skegness at this election should make the people a promise today that they're only ever going to have one job, and that's to represent this town and Skegness. Because if they're not prepared to do that, I think they should tell the people of Boston and Skegness today and just walk away from the screen to that. I can make that commitment.
I think Paul's stating the obvious, but at the same time, what the people of this town, this constituency, desperately need is solutions to the problems that we face. And that means tackling immigration. It means growing the national economy so that we can invest in local...
Shall we hear from the people who really matter? Let's hear from some voters now in Scunny Skegness and find out what issues are important to them.
Immigration.
Why?
There's like no jobs for anyone anymore.
Sending all the foreigners back. Where they come from?
Where do they come from?
I don't know. Poland, all over the place, isn't it?
There's hardly any jobs about because it's winter time, so they're all seasonal mainly, so it's pretty hard work here.
On Sunday, because I work in Ingham, I have to get a lift into Skegness to go anywhere or anything on a Sunday, and it's just awful.
So transport's the big issue for you?
For me, the big issue is transport and just general sorting the area out.
I just basically don't look after the roads and the pavements properly, especially not for disabled people. You get jolted everywhere. It's horrible. If you've got bone problems, you know, like I have, every bump hurts.
Some views there from the streets of Skegness. It's so bracing, you know, but we're back here embracing Boston live. Now, look, it would be untrue to say that immigration is the only issue in this constituency, but I would say it is the most dominant issue. Matt Warman, David Cameron promised to cut immigration 5 years ago. Net migration has gone up on his watch. That's a huge failure on behalf of the Tory-led government, isn't it?
Well, what we haven't managed to do is tackle immigration at the root cause. And for this town, for this constituency, that is our relationship with Europe. What a Conservative majority government will do is reform welfare to make sure that we're not overly attracted by comparison to our European neighbours, and we will give people a referendum on our membership of the European Union. A straight in-out referendum. We are the only party that will actually deliver that. Other parties will talk about it. We are the only ones that will make it happen.
So, Robin Hunter-Clarke, you've heard there, Tory pledged to deliver an in-out referendum. Will that solve the issues around immigration?
I think it will. If we certainly we cannot control immigration until we leave the European Union, but we're not going to get the referendum. It's all a con. The only way to get it, as I've already said, is to get enough UKIP MPs in the House of Commons so we can force the next government to hold one. We can't do all these reforms on immigration. As you just said, the Tories have failed. They haven't got the numbers down. Net immigration running at around 300,000. Under UKIP's proposals to adopt an Australian-style system, we'll be getting it somewhere between 30 to 50,000, which is returning to normality prior to 2004. This isn't a radical policy. This is returning back to normality on the subject.
David Watts, the Lib Dems position is that, you know, you're advocates of the European Union, you believe in an open-door policy on migration, so it's more of the same, isn't it?
In this constituency, if we didn't have a large migrant workforce, the farms would be really struggling. And the big difficulty that UKIP have is they won't grasp the reality that if we had a referendum, they will lose. You know, the people of Britain know that being in Europe is far, far better for us.
Let's have our say.
I'm quite happy to have a referendum, but you will come second.
Well, you're blocking it in the House of Commons currently.
We will win. But you know, what we need to make sure is that, pardon me, is that everyone who comes in pays their fair share and contributes to taxes, and the reality is that immigrants pay far more into the system than they take
all right, Robin Hunter-Clarke, you look around Boston, there are many new businesses here, people paying tax, employing staff. Migration has been good for this town, hasn't it?
There is good immigration here, but there are all...
What's bad immigration?
There's also bad immigration. People coming here and claiming benefits and taking jobs from people, and the pressure on local services. It is happening in this town, but we've got to get a grip on the numbers. That's the point. And that's the only party that can deliver that is UKIP, as I've already said.
We've got to talk about some of the real issues that affect Boston and some of the big issues that affect Boston. are houses of multiple occupation, where in this town we should have licensed that issue, and that would have resolved some of the bed hopping, the overcrowding. And I can tell you on a daily basis, when I'm talking to people, they're fed up that a lot of the recommendations of a major report that I chaired we didn't implement. And I have to say, and that was blocked by the Conservatives, not by any of the other parties, by the Conservatives, and I don't know why. But all I can say to you, the kind of issues that we need to deal with zero-hour contracts, we need to deal with single nationality employment agencies. Yes, we deal with some of the benefit issues. I'm surprised that the Conservatives haven't stopped family allowance being taken out of the country. But I have to say, one of the big issues that we need to do, we need to actually have and implement some of the major recommendations that we've seen in Boston, and we failed, and we should, if we can't do it, we should actually give the report back to the people of Boston and say we failed.
Matt Warman, yeah, UKIP say you failed on immigration. Why should people trust your party again?
I think, for a start, the problem that we've had over the past 5 years is that we have been in coalition. We haven't been able to do the crucial things that a majority Conservative government will achieve over the next 5 years. But what I think you're hearing all around from all the other candidates is that these are complex issues. We need sophisticated solutions, and we need to be in a position where we can put real progress into place. And I agree with Paul that we should absolutely be regulating zero-hours contracts in a different way. That's a very important issue. We should absolutely.
But you've ignored the problem. You've made the problem worse. You actually, every day, you make the problem worse because you talk and no action. We can deal with some simple issues in Boston. You ignore them too often. That's why people in Boston are getting really fed up with politicians.
I don't disagree with you that people are fed up with politicians, and I agree with you that we need some action, but it is only a majority Conservative government safeguarding the economy to invest locally, tackling immigration, delivering a referendum on Europe.
And we need an MP who's going to put...
So if UKIP's point system came in and unskilled migrants didn't come to this country, who would do the jobs in the fields, in the pack houses that English people don't want to do?
It's quite clear that we offer jobs to local people first and foremost, and if we can't fill jobs, which undously we may not be able to...
Why aren't local people doing those jobs right now?
Because they can't get the work, because they're going... It's a lot cheaper
because their wages are being undercut, is that what you're suggesting?
Wages are being compressed by migrant labour coming into this town. What I'm suggesting is that we offer local jobs to local people first, something the Tories cannot do while we're a member of the European Union. They're campaigning to stay in, even if there is a referendum. And what I'm saying is if there are vacancies, undoubtedly there will be. Then we open those jobs up to the whole of the world on a work permit basis system like they do in Australia. That's fair, less discriminatory than the current policy, and that's what UKIP would do.
So you'll have the same number of people from around the world
here. Local people, believe it or not, Matt, that actually want to do those jobs. You might not realise that, but there are.
Hang on, don't talk over each other. David Watts.
Unemployment here is lower than the national average. If people were struggling to get jobs, it would be higher. Your figures just don't make sense.
I don't trust
your policy just doesn't make sense. So you
talk to the people on the ground. You don't live here. You know nothing about this. I'm sorry.
Who speaks up. We actually need somebody who is going to lead this debate in Parliament. For too long, this issue has not been led in the right way. If we're going to take it forward, we need to grasp the kind of issues. There are some documents, there are reports, there is evidence. Let's use that evidence and make sure that we take the town forward. But we can't ignore it, and by ignoring it, we ignore the people of Boston and Skegness, and that's intolerable.
And to kind of phrase, I agree with Paul, and I think it's interesting that you've got Liberal Democrats pointing out some of the economic realities of migration. You've got UKIP saying, I don't believe the figures. We need to be basing our policies on real data that produce real sophisticated solutions.
I want real action. I don't want talk, I want action.
Hang on. Nigel Farage a few weeks ago said that the reason kids don't play out in the street, play football here in Boston, is because of immigration. Do you agree with that?
There is a lack of cultural cohesion in this town. That is evident. There is. And that's because of the sheer numbers of people that have entered one town at one point in time. If we control immigration, people integrate into society. And under our proposals, that's what would happen. That's what's happened for decades.
One of the big issues we've got to resolve is that we don't know the population of Boston.
No, we don't.
And one of the problems that we need is that when people come here, we know under the census, the 211 census, there are thousands of people that weren't registered. What we need to do is that when people come to Boston, they need to register with the local authority, because if they don't register, we don't know the numbers, we can't deliver the proper services, we can't plan services. So at the end of the day, we've got to be really radical. When you come to Boston, we actually have got to find out who you are, and before we can kind of develop the kind of services that we need.
But do we just need to accept that towns like Boston are changed forever because of migration?
Towns always change, and migration is always a part of that. It's no different now than it's been throughout history. You know, towns like Boston, towns like Skegness, on the coast, people come into those areas. It's always been that way. And to try and demonise migrants now has been the root cause of all social evils.
You're demonising migrants?
Not at all, no. There's some people here that have come over from Eastern Europe working very hard, paying into the system.
Do you have friends who are migrants?
Yes, I do, absolutely. But the point is, we've got to get a grip on the numbers. That's all it's about. It's nothing to do with race, it's nothing to do with nationality. It's the sheer numbers of people that we have to control. You don't call Australia a racist country because they control their borders. That's all we want to do. It's quite simple.
We must hear now from some of the other candidates standing in the Boston and Skegness constituency. We'll hear from an independent from Europe, the Pilgrim Party and the Green Party.
I've worked tirelessly for the last 2 years. Little things like the building behind me here, which I've managed to save. It's a listed building. I've saved the building, the museum and the library for the local community. Worked 24/7, listening to people's issues and representing them. And the fact is, we've got to look at the area. Boston Skegness has got some of the most dangerous roads in the whole country with fatalities, and we're the fourth poorest region in Northern Europe, and this needs addressing.
I consider the most important issue for Boston Skegness is the population issue. We need to address the match funding for the real numbers of people who are here. The GPs are underfunded, the NHS is underfunded, transport is underfunded, everything is underfunded here.
I'm getting a bit fed up with people saying and blaming, pointing fingers at immigrants when they're coming across and doing jobs. Boston's always had low wages, constantly had low wages, and this is now being propped up by the government through tax credits. And so the taxpayers are paying more through tax credits to support these businesses who are taking lots and lots of money, lots and lots of profits, while people can't afford to put food on their tables, and it's wrong.
And here's a full list of the candidates standing in the Boston and Skegness constituency in the general election on May the 7th. Right, in the time we have left, what is your pledge to the people of Boston and Skegness? Why should you be the MP for this area? Matt Warman.
We need an economy that is growing so we can invest locally, we need a referendum on Europe, and we need to reform welfare. Other parties will talk about this, but it is only the Conservative Party that will deliver that growing economy, will deliver that referendum, and will keep Ed Miliband and Nicola Sturgeon out of running the UK and breaking it up.
Paul Kenny, Labour.
You need somebody who's going to stand up for Boston and Skegness, if nationally challenge their own political parties, fight for the people of Boston and Skegness. But I also think dealing with some of the issues that I heard, like over the weekend, where the maternity unit isn't probably going to get built at the Pilgrim, because I suspect we've got more Conservative cuts. What we need is somebody who challenges for the people of Boston and Skegness.
Robin Hunter-Clarke, UKIP.
Well, I'm born and bred in this constituency. I know the area, I know the issues. Don't be conned by the old established parties. Let's vote for something different. Let's vote for change. Vote for UKIP on May the 7th.
David Watts, Liberal Democrats.
Well, the only thing that's certain is it's going to be a coalition after the next election. We've been in there, we've shown we can do it. We'll put a heart to the Tories, we'll put a head and a brain to the, a heart to Labour and a head and a brain to the Conservatives.
Well,
right first time round.
Well, that's been a fascinating debate. Thank you all for your time today. We've been here at the Assembly Rooms in the centre of Boston, a fascinating history to this town.